Hi, welcome.
Hi.
It's actually nice to hear your voices.
Thank you. Yours too. I've heard yours before, but it's good to hear it again.
So, should I address you as Lillian and Casey or
Tracy's fine, actually. That's what the T's for.
Tracy? Oh, okay.
It's Casey and Tracy.
Oh, nice. Okay, that makes it easier.
One of these days we'll have to fight to the death over who gets to be the real one, but
It's happening with Jello in a pool.
it's fine, yeah.
What's up, kids?
Hey.
Hi, Dale. Oh, it's nice to hear your voice too.
Plus, also, if anybody doesn't know, sup, kids was my way of saying hello, my friends.
This is going to be pretty interesting.
Well, I'll just.
We have that effect.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'll just jump in quickly with a very brief. I would love to hear from the guests first before any of us, including myself, give our opinions on things, because I don't have drastic amount of knowledge when it comes to what they do. However, I will say this. I do understand enough to understand the controversy.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of things where you can understand why people feel the way they feel without agreeing with them. And I think this is one of these situations, at least for me, in the secular community, this is one of those things that people look at and go, oh, I don't like that, because they don't know a lot about it. Or I don't like that because it's not my preferred way to go about things. But to me, it's important to let people know that there are different ways to go about. So, like, I would never be a member, but I also don't have any problem with those who do it, because they're fighting for what I'm fighting for in a way that it might not be possible to get it done any other way. You know what I mean? Like, I really appreciate what they're doing, because the methods that I prefer probably are going to be less effective. I really think that there's something for everyone, like, no matter how you go about things. People always talk about how I am so articulately barbed with my words, and they go, that's not the way to get it done. Well, no, that's not the way for you to get it done. I just think it's very important that people know you can do things in different ways and get things accomplished together, and then come together as a community in total.
Before we get started, I do also want to just make something clear that tonight, Tracy and Casey, who are ministers in the Satanic Temple of Houston, they are not necessarily here to speak for the voice of their congregation. So I just wanted to kind of make that clear. They will be sharing their personal perspectives, and hopefully in about 30 minutes or so, we'll open the floor for any questions you may want to ask. And all right, so yeah, thanks all for joining us tonight. And thank you, Tracy and Casey, who I've been exchanging back and forth conversations for a while now. So thank you for just fitting us into your schedules.
Wait a minute. We couldn't add a Stacy or a Macy?
I mean, we can find one for you if you really need one.
So Lacey.
Oh, Lacey's good. I can be Lacey.
And would you guys, are you going to be presenting separately, or did you want to just feed off one another's information? Like, I'm not really sure.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I know it wasn't intentional, but as we're just starting off and we're introducing two people from the Satanic Temple, can you please not say feed off of each other for the listeners? We don't know who's here, and they're going to start accusing us of eating babies again, okay?
Oh, I am.
I was about to drop a baby eating joke, but I figured that wouldn't go well.
That's why I'm here. I'll take it.
Pretty well done. I am hungry. God. Okay, sorry, guys.
Well, Casey and I typically do work pretty well together, and I'll go with it. We do feed off each other routinely.
Well, once again, thank you both for joining us tonight. And I think what would be nice to start off with would actually just be telling us a little bit about yourselves.
Do you want to go first, Tracy?
I absolutely can.
Go for it.
All right. So actually, I was always raised in an atheistic leaning household. My grandmother was Catholic, huge influence in my life, but she was not the kind of person that pushed that specific belief. She invited me. I did enjoy the theatrical aspects of Catholicism, but I was not personally interested in the religious proponent. I grew up reading excessive literature, books, always felt a bit on the outside of the religious perspective, just because none of it really seemed to click for me. I tested out paganism, tried a lot of different things, and then I actually stumbled upon LaVey and the Church of Satan. And there's nothing particularly, it just wasn't quite, I identified with a lot of it, but it wasn't quite where I was. And then around 2014, 15, I then heard about the Satanic Temple and started checking them out. And it was much more in line with my particular viewpoints. and the way that they were approaching things with that slight bit of humor and then the seriousness of what they're trying to achieve and the tenets, it really just connected with me. And then I kind of went from there. But I've been practicing Satanism in many forms since, I don't know, it's probably been about 20 plus years.
One thing I will ask before you guys get a little deeper is, can you just tell people, I know this might sound silly to you, but can you just tell our listeners whether you do or do not worship Satan?
We, in fact, do not. It's actually a metaphorical being, and it's really more of looking at it from the rebellion, where we're fighting against arbitrary authority. And so it's metaphorical from the romantic Satanism.
So my own background was I was raised Pentecostal in Appalachia, and my grandfather, he founded the church that we went to, and he laid the physical cornerstone to it, actually. So I was raised pretty hardcore Pentecostal, and it was one of those situations where as a kid, you're told that everything that you are interested in, you can't do that because that's satanic. It's kind of like at a certain point, you think, well, maybe there's something to the whole Satan thing if everything I love is satanic. So I had a little friend in the church whose brother was much older, and I don't know if he was actually a LaVeyan Satanist or not, but he was very interested in Satanism, and we stole his books, and we thought they were wonderful. And he, of course, finds out and he steals them back. So we just would go to Walden Books in the local mall and sit and like read every Satan book that we could find. We were like 12 years old, and we thought that was just very interesting. I didn't
And just quickly for
Go
our
ahead.
guests, Walden Books was a bookstore. We used to have places where we kept books in stores where you could go to the store and pick out a book. Crazy, right?
Right. So that was sort of how I discovered Satanism. And as I get a little older, some of the accusations made against me, my grandfather had retired from preaching and new people were in there. And this was kind of when the evangelical churches were turning from being, they actually used to be a lot more socially and economically liberal. And they were taking that hard right turn. This was right at the very advent of that. And this is when the satanic panic was rearing its head. So eventually there were some accusations made against me at the church that I was a witch. I was actively practicing witchcraft, and that I was laying curses on the babies in the nursery, and that I was dangerous. And they just kept going on and on about that. And my mother eventually decided that the church was doing a lot of damage to her children. So she did an official resignation from it and took us out of the church. It was kind of a big deal, yeah. And then she joined a Methodist church, and I was afraid of the Methodists because I had been raised to think that church had to be this crazy charismatic, speaking in tongues and being slain in the spirit and spontaneous dancing kind of thing. I was scared of the Methodists. So, eventually, I was just kind of done with Christianity. So, eventually I kind of got into very angry atheism. And, I still really liked satanic imagery and all of that. So when the Satanic Temple, I became aware of the Satanic Temple when they started their Kickstarter to fund constructing the Baphomet statue. At the time it was to put in Oklahoma, and then later it became they wanted to install it in Arkansas. But that's how I found out about the Satanic Temple. I never thought that I could join. There's a sticky situation with employment and then family and all of that. But eventually I was just like, I've been whining about not being able to join for so long. What if I joined? And then I did. And here I am.
Thinking on joining, is there it's pretty easy to join? Is it something you just sign up to, or?
It's incredibly easy to join. Anybody really can join, but we would recommend for people that are interested in joining, check out the literature, check out the FAQs, the site, understand, what you're joining into, and understand that there's a lot of stigma that comes with that. It's you go to the site and you could join there. And then from there, if you want to get more involved in, let's say a congregation, you would have to apply with that specific congregation, whatever their membership process happens to be. And then it would go from there.
Yeah, like Tracy was saying, there's a few ways to get involved. Like most people who join, they just sort of identify with the 7 tenets and they sign up for the mailing list and then they self-identify as a member of TST and that is perfectly fine. Some people who are more interested in the religious community aspect sometimes get involved with local congregations. Some people who are more interested in the activism aspect might get involved with one of the campaigns.
Can you
Yeah,
can you
there's a lot of ways. Go ahead.
can you share the 7 tenets, or at least just the core?
The
For it.
first tenet is that one should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. Tenet 2, the struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. Tenet 3, one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. 4, the freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego your own. 5, the beliefs should conform to our best scientific understanding of the world. We should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit our beliefs. 6, people are fallible. If we make mistakes, we should do our best to rectify it and resolve any harm that may have been caused. And 7, every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word.
Thank you for that. And I just want to quickly add, because I said, to people that one of the things people might have a problem with is quote unquote following tenets, following rules. There is structure. But to me, and I'm saying from somebody from outside of it, that just sounds a lot like humanism. That sounds like what I want, secular humanism. It's just in different words.
Well, I'd also like to add that I feel very strongly that the tenets are about me. I apply them to myself. I find it very off-putting when someone says, hey, you're breaking the whatever tenet, like, and tries to police my behavior with the tenets. If they decide that, like, my behavior is not in line with the tenets and we have some kind of relationship and they want to talk to me about that, I'm certainly open to that. But I'm really not open to people tenant policing me, and I try not to do that with other people. Physician, heal thyself is really how I feel about it. I also want to add that none of the tenets are ever meant to be taken in isolation from the other 6. Vaccine mandates, for example, people want to be exempt from vaccine mandates and they tout the third tenet. And I come back with the 5th tenet. So yes, your body is inviolable, but we also use our best scientific understanding. And then the 1st tenet, we have empathy and compassion for people. There are people whose children are undergoing chemotherapy and have compromised, immune systems, and they deserve some sort of protection as well. And we were never supposed to take them like in isolation and hold one above another one. And also, I was at a talk where Malcolm Jerry, one of the co-founders of the Satanic Temple, he said that the 7 tenets are not set in stone. They're literally not set in stone, unlike the 10 Commandments, because they're never meant to be seen as something immutable. It's not a dead religion the way that I might see some other religions as, like unchanging. We're open to change.
Yeah, it very much follows the scientific method. I think that Satanism, at least through TST, is very much a self-correcting enterprise. And as things happen, as things change, I believe that I've seen it change with those things.
I have a question for you both. When I first met you, I saw that, well, in emails, exchanges, whatnot, and you had mentioned that you have titles. Could you tell us a little bit more about what your titles mean in your group?
Sure. I mean, we're very flat as far as things go. Titles are not necessarily a meaning of status outside of like ministerial. But I am a co-congregation head with our particular congregation. And that means I work with some of the other congregation heads to help with the different community outreach and things that we do to shape what our particular congregation does.
I guess mine's a little bit more touchy. I don't, again, we don't speak for the Satanic Temple, the international organization. I do work for the Ordination Council. The Ordination Council is it's responsible for ordaining ministers of Satan, for doing the education and continuing education of the Satanic ministry. And I guess the way that I would explain it is the religion part of the religion is really what the Ordination Council shapes. So that's what I do in the Satanic Temple.
It's interesting that you mentioned religion in that. Does it often confuse other people? Like, I mean, I've heard this before where people say, "Oh, you're an atheist, so that's just another kind of religion." So how do you guys approach that?
I prefer to let people self-identify.
Mhm.
It really kind of chaps my ass when people say, well, atheism is just another religion, whatever. Let the atheists define atheism. I think that they're probably
Mhm.
pretty good at that, especially
Mhm.
when they're talking about their own atheism. As for the religious part of it, there are other non-theistic religious traditions, and I think that they're valid. And I think that not believing in the supernatural doesn't disqualify me from having deeply held moral beliefs, traditions, lore, stories, shared culture, community, all the things that religion offers. Like there are groups who like to say, you're not a real religion, it's just a farce. And first of all, who's to say that farce can't be religious?
Mm.
There's so many rich and beautiful traditions worldwide where they follow or they revere trickster gods. And who's to say that that's not a perfectly valuable and valid spiritual belief? I do get frustrated sometimes with people who are very adamant that that religion can only include the supernatural. Like if you don't have a supernatural element, you're not a real religion. I am if I want it to be.
And I would say that the things that we feel are definitely, well, that I feel are firmly held religious beliefs that I definitely live my life with and by and try to exemplify in my actions.
I like that. Especially like I can understand the what you're trying to say. Also, like with this okay atheist space, the name doesn't necessarily mean this is only for specific atheists.
We actually get bothered about the whole religious aspect so much more by devoutly faithful people from other religions than we do from atheists. Not every atheist likes what we're doing, but it does feel a lot more live and let live.
And I can say like I don't really know much about it. I did see the documentary like a lot of people did, Hail Satan, but I kind of gleaned from that more of activism. So my perspective was that, oh, this is a very strong activist group. So that's what that was my takeaway from it. But you guys are saying you're much more than just activists, right? Not everyone in your group is doing something politically intertwined, right?
Certainly not. No, I think Satanism, it's very important to understand it's individualistic, just like anyone that experiences any religion or any experience really. And activism is often just a natural extension of our deeply held beliefs, like what you see in the tenets, where we want to stand up for people who are maybe suffering or being held down by certain arbitrary authorities or other people that are trying to take away rights or things of that nature. It just naturally flows into what we stand for and believe.
And something that we've had trouble with is people or other groups trying to kind of hijack the Satanic Temple or Satanism and try to make it about every cause, even causes that have only the most tenuous or maybe even not existing relationships. We find that the people who don't really last very long within Satanism are the people who try to make literally everything about their Satanism. Um, it is perfectly fine. In fact, we really like the fact that our members have things outside of Satanism. They have lives outside of Satanism. They have activism and causes that maybe don't overlap so strongly. And that's great.
I
Um,
have a question for both of you because there could be
yeah.
different perspectives, and this is my opinion. I'm or kind of guessing. For broad strokes, would you say that what it does for someone, for a non-religious quote unquote person or somebody who's left a religion, is fills in the voids that a religion would provide without all of the negative?
I mean, that's to say you have a religious void in your life.
No, no, no. But what I don't mean a religious void. Actually, I don't. I guess again, it depends on how we use that word. But what I mean is a void left from lack of
Mm,
community, lack of
mm,
feeling, that you're amongst friends and family, a lack of the things that we as a society tend to attach to religions or get,
mm.
from those communities, but they're not really related to the actual religion themselves. As far as I mean, even you were just saying, doing those community things and being there for reach outs and I mean, you two are friends,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah,
So that kind of thing is what I'm talking about.
yeah.
That it replaces a lot of that stuff.
For
It
me,
it
it absolutely did.
mhm, mhm, yeah. And I think the nice thing is that it provides such a broad array of people, but you're gathered around the fact that you have this like-minded mentality already And then it kind of builds off of that. And then you find that other people kind of click in different ways that you would not maybe have expected. So it's a beautiful place to grow from, where you can find a safe place to kind of be yourself, where society doesn't always understand that.
I think a lot of people who are attracted to Satanism were used to being the weirdest weirdo in the room. And that can be a positive experience, but it's also an exhausting experience if that's how you live your entire life. And it's a deeply alienating experience if that's how you live your whole life. And I know that for me, the Satanic Temple and satanic communities in general are a place where I don't have to carry that baggage unless I really, really want to.
I know that you're both in the same congregation in the Satanic Temple of Houston. Do you have a large congregation or any facts you want to talk about?
We have a decent sized congregation. I mean, congregations come in pretty much all shapes and sizes. There's, I believe, congregations throughout the majority of the United States. Then we have some in some other countries and provinces in Canada. It's very wide and broad.
They do tend to be rather small though. We don't proselytize.
Mhm.
I guess if you were to find a taboo in satanic circles,
Mhm.
proselytization would be that.
Mhm.
And to be just really blunt, also, COVID really decimated like a lot of congregations, going so long without being able to do anything in person. People come and go. There's also no pressure or guilting to remain faithful or whatever you would call it. People really do come and go freely.
So you can leave and still maintain your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Please understand, some people have a lot of ideas about Satanism.
Yeah.
So, we tend to choose our words carefully
Yeah, I got you.
when it comes to that. Like if you look at the history of Satanism, the history of Satanism is that it is an accusation against outgroups. Like
Mhm.
like I hesitate to make this statement because there's always that what if it's not perfectly accurate kind of thing. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to say that historically, one of the first groups that was labeled Satanists were Jewish people, since they were, historical outsiders. So the term Satanist is something that has not really applied to actual Satanists for most of history. It's always just been aspersions that are being cast by whatever group is in power. A lot of how Satanism developed is just through these kind of accusations, like finally people who decided to take on the mantle of that outsider. But we've been accused of everything under the sun, so I guess we do get a little bit touchy sometimes about some of
Well,
it.
it's funny when you say that, starting maybe with Judaism or Jews being accused. What that really is you don't worship our God, the good guy, so you must worship Satan, the bad guy, and that's just normal. I mean, not normal. I mean, it's understandable why they do that, because they think you must believe. It has to be the opposite of mine. But the blood libel cause that we always hear when people talk about, atheists eat babies or Satanists or whatever, that started with Judaism. So it's
Exactly.
not shocking that connects in the same way at all.
Mhm.
Right. And then historically, whichever, group is in power labels the group that's out, Satanists. Like Catholics have called various types of Protestants Satanists, and Protestants, of course, have called Catholics Satanists. I was, being raised in the Pentecostal church, I thought that all Catholics were secret Satanists. Like, I didn't know any better. I thought maybe there were some who were like innocent, who were like kids who just didn't know like what their parents were into, but I was raised thinking that Catholics were actually scary Satanists. The label gets thrown around to all kinds of people, and to some groups of people, hanging that label on them can put them in danger. So we do try to take care with how we identify others.
Yeah, and that's why I really appreciate you both coming up here and just also giving your personal perspectives on things, because there are probably a lot of people listening today that don't know enough about the Satanic Temple. I know I certainly don't. So, I really just appreciate this little bit of insight. This is probably the time to go ahead and open up for Q&A. I know Dale and I have been asking questions back and forth, and we're just being really inquisitive, and I'm sure many of you are.
Don't be scared. We're not going to bite. I mean, we're definitely separated by a screen,
We've,
but you're
we've,
safe.
we've got a couple people coming in now, because I'll let them get to it. And if we have any time later on, we can still do a little more.
Hi, Carolyn. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing okay. How are you?
Good, good. What was your question for tonight?
Yeah, I was curious, what a typical gathering looks like in the Satanic Temple, if there is such a thing?
There's really not. um, I mean, they kind of fall roughly into different categories. Like sometimes there are just congregation meetings, which are like discussing whatever business we need to attend to. We have this fundraiser going on, we have this event coming on, whatever. And then a lot of times it just turns into social hour or game night or whatever. There are also rituals or holiday type celebrations. So it depends on if it's like business, serious business, Satan business, or what. I mean, annually, well, starting last year and there's another one this year, there's SatanCon, which is the largest gathering of Satanists that has ever happened to the best of our knowledge. And that looks like a lot of educational panels, off-site events that are parties and things. Like it's just a lot of different things, I guess.
Really, it's a lot of communal conversation pieces, getting to know one another, connecting over books, comics, games. Sometimes, like Casey mentioned, rituals, which are actually something I like, and it's really a catharsis for me, going through. Let's just say for a ritual like an on baptism, where you get to, as someone that I was baptized, it was a choice that was made for me. And I was able to go through and choose to ceremonially baptize myself to rid myself of that situation. So that was something that was cathartic and I enjoyed. But as far as typical, I wouldn't say many things we do are ever really typical.
That's true. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the holidays.
So we have a few. Let's see here. I'm trying to go in order of the calendar year. So in February there's Lupercalia, which is this around Valentine's Day. It's the celebration of like sex and sensuality and the self, and the inviolable body. And then there's Hexanacht, which is a little bit more of a solemn celebration. It's in the end of April. That's kind of a memorial for anyone who's been harmed by pseudoscience or superstition. Unveiling Day is July 25th. That's a celebration of, the revelation of self. It's the anniversary of the Baphomet statue being unveiled. And then Halloween, which, is upcoming, which is, pretty much exactly what you think it is. It's this spooky season, kind of reveling in the darkness. And then Sol Invictus, which is the kind of winter solstice celebration, the light of the knowledge and darkness.
Being unconquered by superstition. Yeah.
That's really cool. Thank you both for sharing all this. It's very interesting.
And there are some congregations that have their own customs, like their own spins on some of the holidays. For example, the Colorado congregation, they don't celebrate Sol Invictus, they celebrate Saturnalia, which is just sort of a different spin on that seasonal celebration.
I believe that's a Roman tradition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also good for keeping mosquitoes away.
Nice. Well, thank you, Carolyn. Rick, hi. You can unmute Mike and ask your question.
So honestly, this is my first introduction to even understanding anything about Satanism at all. All I know is the cliche stuff. I'm taken aback. The tenets you guys described are my belief system already as it stands. I'm trying to form my question now because I had it and it just disappeared on me. So when it comes to like someplace where I live in central Iowa, would there be a congregation there?
There's a congregation. Are they still a candidate group or are they official yet?
I wanted to say they were pretty much close, if not. I don't see them yet listed. But
Okay.
With that, I will say that we do have a list, and I believe I shared it so it should be in the list of different resources for you guys to look at. If you were curious, it lists all the different congregations, and that'll be through the satanictemples.com. And that's just under the Find a Congregation.
Right. And if you're looking to get involved, but like, let's say that a congregation is too far from you, or you have social anxiety, or you're shy, or you have parents who would, murder your face if you decided to get involved with Satanists. The Satanic Ministry does they're called Temple Tuesday services. They also have weekend services, but those are more geared to people who are in different time zones. So every Tuesday online, there are services that are led by Satanic ministers. I think that you would be maybe pleasantly surprised if you are used to, kind of Protestant services being a certain way. In a Satanic Temple service, there's, a minister who gives a talk on a subject for, for about 15 minutes or so, and then they have interlocutors. They have a whole panel where they, have dissenting voices, or they talk things through, or they have different perspectives, and that's how they go. And there's a very robust and lively chat going on for people who are spectating. And sometimes they choose panelists from the spectators. It just depends on if it's an open panel or not. But I think it's a really good way to sort of get your finger on the pulse of what satanic thought is as done in the Satanic Temple. And it's a way to participate. Like, you can log in and never say a word to anyone, and it's fine. Or you can log in and you can get really involved in the chat. And eventually you may be comfortable enough that you end up on a panel, but there's no pressure for that ever. And if you never do that, that's fine. No one will say anything or even notice.
And I believe there's also archives if you want to look back through things that have already taken place and just do it from a more passive perspective. Even than that, you can certainly do that as well.
The archive of services is a wonderful way to get a feel for just the variety of satanic thought. You have everything from, was there a service about sex work, or am I misremembering? I feel like there was. I did a service on children in Satanism. Someone else did it. Oh, we have a group of BIPOC Satanists who, frequently do panels of, people of color in satanic thought. Yeah, there's a lot of diversity of thought.
I just wanted to tell you, and this is just a personal note, but you said the phrase when you were speaking, trying to warn people, which I appreciate, but you said, if you have parents that will murder your face, and I just wanted to tell you, at that moment, you became someone who I will like forever.
Okay.
She has that way about her. You have to be careful.
If you have parents that'll murder your face off, I don't know why. I just completely related to those words in that order.
I'm just really more curious than anything now. I'd actually been told that there was we were getting a satanic school that was opening up here, and I had already joined a website for that. Is that related to this in any shape or form?
No, they're not.
Okay.
There's probably some crossover, members or that sort of thing. Our campaign that has to do with schools primarily is the After School Satan Club, and then there's the Project Protect Children. The particular, satanic school project that someone was working on in Iowa, it's not that we're necessarily unfriendly or anything like that. It's just, it has no affiliation with the Satanic Temple.
So to give you an idea of the world I come from, my wife's actually a teacher. She teaches high school English and special education. These are kinds of the values that we both share. She actually got forced to grow up Catholic for her whole life. She actually believes, personally chooses to believe in Greek gods.
So she's Hellenistic revivalist, I guess.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I couldn't remember the name of it, but that's it. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know I was an atheist. I just didn't believe in God. I only apparently realized that's a thing. I just didn't believe. I didn't know it was a thing to not believe.
Yeah, I know what it's like to not feel like you have that option. It didn't occur to me to be an atheist until much after the fact. It was just something that decent people weren't, in my upbringing. My father was, but he never used that word.
Thank you so much, Rick. Let us connect another time and see if you decide to explore that option. I noticed, let's see, someone else, Miss Amalia. Hi, how are you? Miss Amalia actually was another one of our wonderful guest speakers. Let's see, probably about a month ago. So thank you for listening in again.
No, and thank you to our speakers. This is such an interesting subject. I apologize if this question has already been brought up or was discussed prior to me getting on. I got on a little bit late, but I'm really very curious about if you have any insight as to the reason why the founders decided to go with the Church of Satan, instead of some other humanist, I guess, way to describe the church. If you have any insight into that.
The Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple are different, but I think I get what your question is asking. I guess the answer that I would give, and the answer always sounds really flippant, and I don't mean it to be, but the answer is because we're Satanists. There are so many wonderful groups that do great work. The Freedom from Religion Foundation. There's so many great atheist groups. There's, secular humanist groups. They're wonderful. They do great work. I consider them in so many ways allies. People who identify with the 7 tenets but are just not sure about that whole Satan thing. I point them in those directions and I say, I wish you well. You are part of my greater community, and that's wonderful. But when it comes down to it, the reason that it's the Satanic Temple is because we are Satanists, and that means something. Atheism describes what I don't believe in, and that's good, and it's good to have those definitions. But Satanism describes what I do identify with.
Yeah, and I would say that it's definitely for me, and one of the things I always felt clicked most was that Satan was this representative character of this anti-hero who rebelled against this authoritative figure who said this is the way the world needs to be and the way humans need to be in these stories. And they stood up and said, well, why? No, they should be able to learn and they should be able to grow as well. And I thought as a person that enjoys constantly learning and being open to different aspects and opinions about the world, it just fit for who I am. And I believe that's what Satanism falls under for me.
And I have a deep affection and reverence for the Satan archetype. So, that's also part of it. And, just on a lighter level, the aesthetic, I enjoy the aesthetic. I enjoy some of the mythos that goes along with it. And I think that I would say that, choosing to self-identify as a Satanist, it also means that I'm kind of making this commitment, at least to myself, that I will always fight on the side of the people who've been unjustly and unfairly oppressed. So it's more than just the lack of belief in the supernatural. It's kind of those extra steps that I identify with.
Thank you so much for going into that. I've always honestly been curious. I've only watched a documentary. I don't remember the name. The tenets are absolutely amazing. I think they are what we should all strive for. And I appreciate you guys coming on here and sharing that with us.
I appreciate your question and thank you for being here.
And thanks so much, Miss Amalia. I really appreciate everyone coming in here today just to listen, if not just for a little bit, because this is a topic that I didn't really know a lot about either. So it really gave me an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the Satanic Temple and what it was about. And then also just hear from these two wonderful people, just their own perspectives. So yeah. Rick, I see that you have your hand up.
Yes, I actually think I have developed a question. When you were describing Satanism earlier, I guess I'm having difficulty understanding. If you had to phrase it in a specific way, what really separates Satanism versus being anti-theist? If you could summarize it how would you do that?
I think it would be the emphasis, that specific archetype of person who stands up against arbitrary authority, the person who's the champion of the outsider, the person who identifies with the outgroup.
It just sounds in so many ways to me like they're putting some organization to what I consider humanist. Like that's what it sounds like to me. Like
for sure, to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely draw from humanism, but I would argue
so if I have a superhero complex, would that qualify?
I guess it depends on how you identify and how you see that. I think that one of the things that Satanism has meant to me is, I have lived most of my life as a contrarian. That is an exhausting place to be, and also it can be a really destructive place to be. I've found that throughout most of my life, whenever I've joined groups for various reasons, that the role that I find myself either ushered into or falling into, tends to be the critic, the person who says, hey, this is fucked up, do it a different way, or you're doing it wrong. And while that certainly has its place, that it can also be destructive, and it can also be very counterproductive to actually getting any good work done. And I feel that Satanism has taken me maybe a step to the left from that role in a very healthy way. Because instead of feeling like I have to do that all the time, I feel like my existence and identity as a Satanist is enough of that, and that I can move forward and have some, maybe if not peace, at least have some ability to function in a more healthy fashion.
For sure. I think one of the things I did appreciate about it is growing up, I was involved with foster care. And I think that when you go through that process and you lose a lot of your identity and you're kind of put aside as the other and you lose a voice, you realize just how many people are in that same boat. And Satan, as a metaphor to me, was about speaking up for those people, about pushing back at that system and realizing that it's more than just one specific system. There are so many that overlap that kind of brush aside the opinion of a child or brush aside the opinion of someone that is seen as less than societally. And that's one of the most important things that I felt it brought to me was ability to speak on behalf of those people of myself in a much more constructive fashion.
We are getting kind of close to ending things. So I would like to say that if anybody else has anything else, I would like to thank both of you for coming. Because even right now, just with what Zaylen and I have said, and then what we've heard from all our guests, I've even heard some questions. That's why I like having other people, because I like hearing questions from other minds, people who think differently, and to give a different perspective. One of the core things I got from this is that even though the tenets are the tenets, it's so not as rigid as, or kind of like almost like you can make of it what you will, as long as you kind of adhere toward the tenets. And to me, that's the biggest difference. Something that I would say would attract me, if it was something I wanted to do, would attract me to that over something else that was more rigid, because we are, everything is fluid. we are all different, and we do have different ways that we adhere to things, as we see with religions, and then they fight with each other. But instead, with this, you can just kind of disagree slightly.
And we do sometimes disagree to many varying degrees,
Well,
but it helps us
sometimes
to
we
grow.
have knockdown, drag out battles. Like, you get in a room with Satanists, and we do tend to attract people who have a very healthy ego.
And a mild authority, thing. So yeah.
And who tend to speak out about things. So we have some epic verbal brawls.
Nice. Well, I think I would like to be part of the verbal brawls at least. I'll put the word verbal in front of there intentionally. Every time I speak, I just want to say this too for myself, from people who know me. Whenever I challenge someone, not whenever, but I often say, and I did just what you said, I do it intentionally. I always say, I will verbally eviscerate you. Because if I just say I will eviscerate you, I've learned that people think I'm going to be violent. So you have to add that verbal or, cordial disagreement. Panama, you have your hand up and you just had a mic sent to you. So did you want to ask any questions to our guests?
Yes, there was a link for Satanic Temple. I am somewhat familiar with them. If I am not mistaken, and I could be, they are more like sort of on the Aaronic side of things. They are not really worshiping Saturn. It's more like I don't know the term, but it's more like they are just atheists, but it's a way to kind of make a point. I have requested to become a member. It's a long journey for me from Allah to Saturn, and I'm a little nervous. But I wanted to ask, did I get this right? They are really kind of. I don't want to use the word decoy or apply, but it is just really kind of jokes on believers sort of thing.
I know what you're saying, but I would like to see how they would word that, because it might be semantics, but semantics can be important. I'm with you.
I think that it can be as serious as you want it to be. So to say that the Satanic Temple is merely a parody religion, I think that sells that sells the Satanic Temple very short. I think that there are people who join, and for them, it's funny, it's ironic, and it's thumbing their nose at something that has hurt them or something that has upset them. And that's perfectly valid. But I also want to point out that for many of us, for many people who self-identify as Satanists, even though that the aspect of humor is certainly ever present, like we do have a pretty good sense of humor about ourselves. At the same time, this is my religion. It is my deeply held religious beliefs. If this were just a parody for me, I think that I would have moved on a long time ago. So, if that's how the expression of it works for you, then, I have no quarrel with that. But there are people who take it much more seriously and have it on a more serious level.
By the way, this
Yeah,
is
go ahead.
exactly what I was talking about a few minutes ago, that it can be more so what you want from it, within certain, rough parameters, but, very rough. You're just describing it to a T. If you want to take it that way, that's okay. But to me, it's that plus this. That makes perfect sense.
No, I was going to say, which is why when you brought up rigidity, we're essentially the antithesis of that. And we really much have such an array of mentalities and personality type. But Satan himself in his representation was always the prankster. And using that levity as a way to bring attention to things is certainly something that I know is employed by many people within the belief system. But it's definitely not what we're all about. It's just part of what we do.
So just to clarify, so are you saying is that there are many people who actually truly believe there is a guy named Saturn who actually exists, and there's the same guy that is antithesis to God? So doesn't that mean that by that implication they admit? By the way, it's totally okay if that's what they think. I'm not criticizing. I'm just trying to get some clarification. So by that virtue of since Saturn
Yeah,
exists, and God
actual
must
devil
also.
worship is what you're asking.
I'm sorry, what?
You're basically asking if some members of their church are actual devil worship.
Right. So by that admission, they imply that God also exists. So it's the is that true? If it is true, then it seems to me then you have an organization where there are theist people just not worshiping the God but Saturn guy, and then there are atheist people, and they kind of live together in this organization. Is that did I get that right?
I'm sure there are people out there in the world that believe in a literal Satan. We just are
Right.
not one of those people.
So I think that the misunderstanding that might be taking place is to automatically couple religion with deities and supernatural belief. And most members of the Satanic Temple and most modern Satanists in general would assert that it's possible to divorce religion from supernaturalism. So we consider ourselves Satanic Temple and modern Satanists consider themselves to be part of a non-theistic religion.
Mm-hmm.
So then, who is Saturn in your view? Is Saturn an actual guy that exists,
No.
or it is just a made-up thing?
It's a metaphorical archetype.
Yeah, it's a story that we deeply identify with.
Yeah, I was going to say the way Panama was saying it at first is what it was. It was everything you said, Panama, except for the last part. It's not supposed to be devil worship at all. Like they were saying, there are devil worshippers out there, and yes, they could be members of that, but it's not related. It's not under their umbrella that the devil is real. I'm sorry, that Satan is real and to be worshipped. That's not
So,
part of
so
anything
you
they
are
do.
more attracted to the idea of the Saturn, as it is portrayed in Abrahamic religions, or at least in Christianity. But that does not necessarily mean that you actually believe there is this guy Saturn who exists, and opposed to that guy there is this god guy who actually exists. Those are just metaphors to you.
That's why I think the word archetype was used. Yeah, well,
And
yeah,
I
that's
also would say that outside of the realm of just the Abrahamic faith, we
Mm-hmm.
also identify with the Satan as the romantic writers have portrayed him, and also the Miltonian Satan, the Satan of literature, because most of what you find about Satan within Christianity has no biblical origin. It's things that were sort of created later and have become kind of part of the Christian mythos of it. So, Paradise Lost had an incredible impact on how people, in modern culture view Satan. There are some things that people will tell you are very true about Satan that they definitely don't appear in the Bible, but somehow
Mm-hmm.
they've filtered into the common culture and even into religion.
Or even on Anatole France with Revolt of the Angels, where you get more of that bringing forth knowledge and things of that nature. So
Yeah, it's kind of time for me to reread Paradise Lost. That was a long time ago, and I have totally forgotten. But I got the reference. So okay, well, thank you so much. Have you ever received any kind of criticism, or what is your best criticism? Well, I shouldn't use the word best, but like severe criticism in terms of, oh, you guys are just believers. It's like you cannot move away from religion and you're still borrowing from the same ideas.
Yeah, that's a good
Things like that.
question. What are some of the tougher criticisms you've had, or the more often, the criticism that you receive more often, or the harshest criticism that you see?
Oh gosh, there's just so many of them. I mean, to be a Satanist is to be
It's to be
subject to
criticized.
criticism. Yeah. How do we pick only one, Tracy?
Well, I definitely have one that stands out if we're talking about in a personal manner. When one of my children actually became ill, we had a person that we knew in our family. They weren't part of our family, but they were very close with our family, and they decided to tell us the reason they became ill was because of our choice in religion. And that was probably one of the harshest things I've ever been told. I mean, we had a daughter going through chemotherapy, and it was probably the worst thing a person could use against you. So that would be mine.
Yeah, so your witch is the same as every other religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you ever, has anybody ever said to you, is that deep down you are just bruised by the traumas that you underwent through religion, and you're just trying to get back at it, being a rebel and contrarian, so on and
No.
so forth? Is that it?
Yes.
Have you ever heard anything like that, or along those things, or psychologically, do you think there is any validity in that kind of
Not really.
argument?
Yes, I've heard that quite frequently. That's
Mm-hmm.
thrown at us all the time. And though, I might take out the word just, like you are just, doing this in response, I think that no one lasts very long in Satanism if it's just purely reactive. But is there any element of truth in that? Sure, I was deeply wounded by Christianity. It's sort of like, being called a Satanist all the time was deeply hurtful to me as a child. So yeah, I would never dispute that there's some element of that there. But we do have plenty of members in the Satanic Temple who were raised in healthy families that had no religion.
Have so many other questions, but I would love to explore them as time goes by. But I do appreciate your answering them, and thank you so much.
It was always good to hear from you. I've listened to you quite a bit, Panama. So it's fun to be able to talk to you.
I'm glad that we have some more questions. I think we should, hear the questions out. So,
So interesting to listen to the different questions and answers.
yeah, we've got Andrea. Hi.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Referring back to the individual that initially, I think he just recently joined the Satanic Temple. He looked like he was looking for some sort of path, or I guess questions, potentially answers to his questions in regards to, whether or not the members of the Satanic Temple or the co-founders believe that Satan, Lucifer, in this case, whatever name he's defined that as an entity. And as I became a member a couple of months ago, I was, just shifting from different religions, trying to find myself. And I initially took about 6 months to get to know a lot of the ministers, the co-founders, and their community, and I really began to love everything that I saw. So it's not just about the Satanic Temple treating Satanism as a metaphor, but they treat their community like a big family. And when I started to see the bond and the beauty that everyone had, it touched me as a person, and I decided to go to the next level and relocate next to a congregation to make the Satanic Temple a big part of my life. So, at this point, I would say that sometimes when people do join, they join for different reasons. Sometimes they just join because it's a misunderstanding of what they're looking for, or in other occasions, they leave because it's just not a tailored suit for them. But overall, my experience with the Satanic Temple has been wonderful. I think the ministers are very knowledgeable people. They're enlightened in all the subjects that detail what, initially they were given the title for. They're very compassionate and warm individuals that welcome everybody with open arms, even if you're not a Satanist. They allow you to be whoever you want to be, as long as you follow the rules of the community, which is to respect everyone, which is normal in any community. But overall, I feel that this was a very positive step in my life. And I feel that in the future, as I see the Satanic Temple progress, I feel that already under the belt, if I'm correct, they have 43 congregations, and I feel that in the future they'll be able to progress possibly in different ways that, are being blocked, unfortunately, due to a lot of discrimination and prejudice. And overall, it's just a big misunderstanding. But for the person who just joined, I feel that this would be a very positive step in your life if you're there for the right reasons, initially. And, that's how I feel about the Satanic Temple. So overall, I love the community, I love the people, and I love the knowledge. And I think it was probably one of the best things I've done in my life. So overall, I think it's a terrific community. And I feel that anyone who has hesitated to join or had questions, I feel that in life you should experience things, get to know the community, get to know the people. It's not just the name, it's the environment. And when you see everything that revolves around it, you'll begin to feel that it's something more than just saying you're a Satanist. It's experiencing it with a group of people that share the same bond you do.
I like that perspective. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you for that.
thanks for coming in, Andrea. And I've only heard very good things about TST Albany. Everything that I know about it is that it's a really positive community.
And I'm thrilled that you're able to find that home, as you described it, and be able to become more a part of a community that you enjoy. So I really appreciate hearing from you.
Hey, Zaylen, I just want to add something in before we do, close things up, and I'll let you take that. But I want to throw this in because I was just thinking as everybody was talking, and thank you for sharing, Andrea. But my thought was, this community. When I say this community, and I'm speaking about what we're doing right here with OK Atheists, and not us, quote unquote, but all of the people I associate with who have similar values in some way because they are not what we would consider typically religious, organized religion. Let me rephrase: organized religion, Abrahamic / the stuff most people think of outside of the box that we're talking about. But when you talk about Satanism, and then I proudly call myself an anti-theist, which scares a lot of people, and then we have people that will identify as agnostic, or atheist, or just non-believer, or Jewish atheist, or whatever. We're all over the board with this. And I just wanted to say that I really felt that from discussing this tonight, that a huge part about that, about us, when I say us, it's such a wide group, but it's just outside of that, traditional organized religion. We're so different, and it's great that we can be different. And I really hope that we will try to somehow, in some ways, accept each other, because when the religions, like especially Christianity, at least I noticed, they don't agree on so many things, just like we're not here when it comes to all the different sects, but they bond together when it comes to fighting for what they believe in. And that happens to be, in a lot of ways, taking away women's rights, taking away rights of the LGBTQ plus community. And I think we really, really need to focus on how we can bond together as a larger group, quote unquote, if we have to be a group. So when we're fighting for rights and we're fighting against them bonding as a larger group, and a lot of them hate each other because of their sects, that we're not that. We're stronger because we don't have that hatred for each other. So we really do, I think, need to focus on that as being something going forward. That when I say community, it's such a broad term, but it's community of people who care about people and put people first.
I think diversity is one of the most important things we have as a society. And if we can make that work together, that will strengthen all of us immensely. When we can look at each other's differences and find them as strengths, it only improves our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thank you so much, Dale, and everyone that had the opportunity to sit here and listen, maybe learn something that they didn't know before. Just appreciate all of you for staying with us today. Before we close, Tracy and Casey, do you have any closing thoughts?
Oh gosh.
I feel like I'm all thinked out, honestly.
That's fair. And I really appreciate the both of you just taking the time to answer questions. I know I personally have learned a lot. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank
Hail
you so much.
Satan.
Hail Satan.
Love you guys. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.